Hello and welcome to the first ever Monday edition of the From the BLM podcast. I'm Andrew Greaves. We'll explain the absence of Simon Evans shortly, but it's fair to say a slightly depleted squad for the second time in less than 7 days. But I am joined by Paul Woodhouse, Justin Connolly and Chris Borden to pick the bones out of Friday night's 3-0 defeat to Manchester City. We are hoping to be joined by our glorious leader at some point, but he's faffing about with some cricket in Miami that none of us can kind of get his head around. So we're going to crack on. So, chaps, 3-0 to Manchester City. It kind of went to script, didn't it? An early goal from that man Haaland. I think most of us were probably fearing the worst at that point, were we? Chris, what did you think when that first Haaland goal went in under 5 minutes?
Yeah, it just it takes all the air out of your balloon as such, doesn't it? It was just such a soft goal to give away. I mean, and you don't give that fella a moment, do you? And I know we're sort of a lot of the discussion was on sort of O'Shea and Bayer dropping towards the goalkeeper and giving him just that glimpse of space, but both finishes are sensational finishes, and he's. I think probably he's only 2 touches in the game, weren't they? But it's just soul destroying to go down to within 3 minutes against a side that you rarely even scored against, to then to be requiring 2-2 to get a win from that sort of game. It's not. But the response was fabulous. I thought for the remainder of the first half.
Yeah, I mean, just in it. It's easy when you go 1-0 down to then start dropping the plan that you've worked all week on and start chasing the game. But I think one of the positives, and we'll come on to positives and negatives in general in a few minutes, but I think one of the positives was the fact that we weren't getting dragged out of position. We weren't chasing, pointless balls. We were still trying to keep that system, weren't we? Even at 1-0 down against, arguably the best club side in the world.
Yeah, we definitely seem to have a game plan and a way of playing, and I don't think that early goal threw us off that at all. I think all 3 goals to me seemed like preventable, which although it's a negative, obviously, that we lost 3-0, I think the margins are still quite fine. It didn't feel to me like we got a real hammering. It felt like we were sort of in the game, even though we were out of it because of the scoreline, and that is a real positive and the positive thing to take from it. But I have to say, I did get the impression that we were working a lot harder than they were, and that if they'd needed to step it up a little bit to get the result, they probably could have done it. I mean, look, it's one game, isn't it? You're playing against the best team in the best league in the world with probably the best goal-scoring striker on the planet at the minute. It's going to be tough, but I think they will beat other teams by more goals than they beat us. If that's the best you can say.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? I think that's the kind of overriding feeling. I mean, I guess would it, if you look at the results in previous encounters, keeping it under 5 probably seems like a good result, not being too flippant about it. But I mean, Chris mentioned that man Haaland. I think both touches they were first time finishes. You cannot give him an inch, can you?
No, you can't. And you look at those stats, don't you? The past 13 games, is it? What's the average? 40, is it 46-1? That's the kind of goal actual difference. Yeah. And I think for all the huff and puff, if you were to switch Haaland out with us, I think we get something out of it. Because like you say, there are only those 2 touches, really. And that was primarily the difference. If you watch the highlights over a couple of times, we arguably look slightly more progressive going forwards than they did. But they're very, very good at taking the sting out of a game and then saying, yeah, stop with that business. Here we go, we'll bag another. And so, yeah, it's that guy Haaland, and you really do know why he kind of gets the money that he does and why they paid as much as they did for him.
Yeah, definitely. Let's get on to some positives then, because I think, Justin, you're right. I think, there was plenty of positives to take from that. One for me, we've discussed him a few times, and I think a couple of us have said we think he will make that step up. Lyle Foster. I mean, I thought the South African had a really good game. I don't think he's going to be that striker you're going to get 20 goals a season from. But did you see enough in that performance on Friday night to suggest that even playing slightly out of position on the left, left wing, which is what he started as, really. That Foster is somebody who's going to become attuned to what's required in the top flight.
Absolutely. I mean, I thought he had a great game. He had some good intensity about him. He looked really fit and sharp, didn't he? There were a few good moves that we put together with that sort of forward line that hasn't really played together, as far as I know. It didn't feature in the preseason friendlies that I saw. And I think, do you know what I think? I just think they didn't get enough of the ball, did they? They didn't. I mean, we only had, what was it, 6% of possession or something like that. You're not going to be able to create chances if you don't have the ball. But like Paul said, if you go back and think about the highlights of the game, the good stuff that we did was prominent in those highlights, even though we spent so little time with the ball. So that, to me, bodes well for when we're playing lesser opposition. And everybody we face from now on is going to be lesser opposition, aren't they?
Yeah, I think Vincent Kompany said after the game that's got to be our worst performance of the season. That's the progress he wants. Chris, yeah. I mean, we mentioned that forward line, Koleosho, Amdouni, Foster. There were little pockets, weren't there, where there was good interplay, and we didn't really kind of ever really trouble the City goal, but there was promising signs there, weren't there?
Usually promising. I mean, it's not often you'll see that Manchester City defence make as many errors, in possession as they did. They were forced, they were hassled, they were harried. They didn't like it. The amount of times we won the ball high up the pitch. Foster was a menace. I thought Koleosho was a real threat with his pace, driving with the ball. Thought he could have, gone on the outside a few times and tested Lewis. I was saying on the chat as well, there's a couple of occasions where he squared up Lewis and little spinning behind and a more direct ball over the top, and he's in. I think his pace, it matches anything. I think you've had an opportunity to at least deliver a ball across or get a strike on goal. But Amdouni showed little flashes as well. Probably made a meal of the challenge for the penalty, which it's. In hindsight, I don't think it was, but just Foster again. I think we saw in flashes last year that he can be a real pressing machine. He'd be an absolute nuisance, and like I say, he looks leaner. He looks more in tune with what Kompany wants, and really, really promising signs.
Yeah, and we'll bring Simon's joined us. We'll bring him in for his first touch. Hopefully, it's a nice, easy touch back to the goalkeeper in a second. But before we do that, Woody. Defensively, some positives as well. I think that I still can't work out what shape we were playing at the back, but let's start with some positives before we pick apart some negatives at the back. Alderkeel, for somebody so young, looks an absolute talent, doesn't he? And we said this last season, but this is a higher level.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he's got quite an engine on him, hasn't he? He's got pace. He's got an engine. I remember him turning up every single corner flag in both halves and thinking, why have you popped up there? Are you playing left back, right back, inverted full back, inverted wing back? What the devil's going on? And, yes, he was at fault for the third goal, giving the free kick away and then a soft header. But the rest of it, he was pretty much everywhere all over the park. I think that definitely bodes well for the rest of the season once we settle down with whether we're playing a back three, back four, however we're going to play it.
Yeah, definitely. And Simon, let's talk about Sander Berge first of all. Sander Berger, however we pronounce it. I think he's kind of pronounced it on his own reveal video, But what did you make of his performance? I think you've kind of changed your opinion of his performance, having watched some of the play back as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, watching the game, it is different when you watch a game live and you watch it as a fan with the emotion and the sort of tension and everything, and then you go and watch it the next day, which I've done before with teams that I've covered as well. When I was covering United a lot, I used to do that. And it's really worthwhile exercise for people who want to analyse a bit, is just to watch it again. And you think you've seen everything, but you haven't when you're watching it as a fan. And watching it as a fan, I was like, Berger looks a bit slow. He's not really having an impact on the game. And I watched it back, and he was involved quite a lot more than I thought. He kept it simple. He's a bit lacking pace when he first gets that ball, that first yard or two. You can see him that being an issue. But it was interesting as well. I saw some comments from a Sheffield United fan on one of the chat forums on Tony Scholes' website, where this Sheffield United fan was saying, yeah, we made that mistake of playing him like in that deeper role. He's actually much, much better further forward in midfield. But I did find watching it again that I was more impressed by him. I mean, I think there are qualities there. Probably pace isn't one of them. But, he had, considering, and Company said it as well, considering he'd only had a couple of training sessions with the team and you're playing against Manchester City, he coped pretty well, I think.
Yeah, and I think the testament, the thing that I looked at is him and Cullen in that midfield. It wasn't, I mean, you didn't notice him very much because obviously you've got someone like Rodri in there. He's probably one of the best in the world in that position. But there was no, I don't think anybody would come away from that game going, we were completely overrunning that middle of the park, because we weren't perhaps committing and leaving gaps behind us and things like that. It would kind of steady away. And you've got to think, of course, that Cullen's barely featured in pre-season because he's not been fully fit. Berger's only had, 1-2 training sessions, as Simon just said there. It's not bad to kind of patch up a midfield and play against the likes of Bernardo Silva and Rodri and, that absolute galaxy of talent that City have got in the engine room, is it?
No, I don't think they put in a bad performance, but I'll say the same about the midfield as I said about what happened up front. We just didn't have the ball enough, did we? I felt that that Burge was a little bit anonymous in that first half, in particular. I'll have to take your word for it, Simon, that he was better than he appeared on the first run. But if you haven't got the ball, there's a lot of positional things going on that your standard punter won't necessarily see. And you're right. Like I said, it didn't feel to me like we were being overrun. They were recycling the ball a lot from side to side, as they always do, trying to, bewitch you with that sort of circular passing movements that they do. But they didn't really, it didn't feel to me like they were like crushing us in that part of the pitch. So Cullen and Burge must have done a decent job there. And to say that he'd only been at the club for 2 days and you throw him in to that, that's got to be a triumph, hasn't it? That's got to be a plus point for us, because as Company kept saying over and over again after the game, we're going to get better than that, and he's certainly one of those players who's going to get better as he settles into that role, isn't he?
Yeah, definitely. Chris,
I was surprised at the possession stats because I felt like you get a feel of the game without looking at the bare statistics. I felt like we had more of the ball, and it was probably even a slight criticism that we didn't move it with enough zip at times. Unless Koleosho was driving with the ball, it felt like we weren't advancing it quickly enough. But Burge, I thought you could see that there was a trust in him already. His teammates were giving him the ball in tight situations. He can handle it technically. To me, again, I've not seen like the sort of dual statistics as they like to talk about now, but it felt like to me give Burnley that physicality and that he was winning the aerial challenges in that area of the pitch. Nothing too progressive with his passing or driving forward with the ball, but I thought he was quite away. I thought he did very well, and I think he's going to be a huge part of the side moving forward.
Yeah, and would he, just looking at kind of where we put that performance in the context of first game of the season, etc., did it feel to you like almost an extension of pre-season for Vincent Kompany? I know we kind of floated this idea on the WhatsApp group between us, but did you I'm not saying we kind of chalked it off as a we're never going to win this, but did it feel a bit more like a game where actually getting a performance was more important than perhaps running ourselves ragged, looking for a win, looking for a goal, and then getting absolutely annihilated by 5 or 6 as we have done in previous years?
I think you can make that argument, yes, and I think you can say the same for City as well. For City, it's a 5 out of 10 performance. They really weren't that much at the races, You know, they just kind of turned up, plodded through the motions, etc. And that's how we have to take it within context. This wasn't City at their absolute best, and we still fell 3 goals short. But we were looking at certain things. Obviously, we're going to get better. City are going to get better. You know, we're going to progress into something slightly different. So I think, in that regard, yeah, it makes quite a bit of sense.
Yeah. Simon, you do fear for teams, don't you, coming up against City when they do it their full stride, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, the second half especially was like a training session from them, really. And we did, we had one shot on target. So let's not pretend that we gave City a game. It wasn't a terrible performance or anything, but I do agree with what you're saying about having that pre-season feel about it, which was set by that rather surprising team lineup that Company went with. And I think, and I was a bit disappointed with that, to be honest, because what I was, we were all saying in the build-up, this might be a good time to catch City. Well, it was, because they weren't anywhere near their best. Still too good. Still would have beaten most teams, but that wasn't Manchester City like you faced them in January, like when we had them in the cup last year, where they're all ready, they're all up to speed and everything. It wasn't. They didn't steamroll us for that reason. But I was just, I was looking forward to seeing Zarori take on Kyle Walker on one side. Okay, if it's Koleosho on the other side, they're having a go at the young lad Lewis and everything like that, really taking it to them. And it never felt like that kind of game. It did have that sort of pre-season feel about it from Burnley's side as well. And I think that for me was the biggest disappointment about the whole night, really, that they didn't have that feeling. I don't know what it was like for you guys in the stadium, but I don't remember on television hearing one of them big roars of sort of, come on, Burnley, now we've got them, we've got 2 corners in a row, or some sort of rush of energy that sort of suggested we were putting them under any pressure. We had spells that were interesting and that were promising, but they never ever came to anything.
No. In the ground, it was the pressing that gave the fans the energy. The errors they were forcing and the just get after them, Burnley, that sort of thing. Not dissimilar to how Sean Dyche used to sort of, go into these games. Where Burnley, that sort of period before pressing really took over the Premier League, where Dyche used to say we can run over teams because we're fitter and stronger. Until teams like until Pochettino and Guardiola came along, and now you have no advantage in that area. They're just as much likely to nick it off you as you are them. But there were a few times it's sort of the stadium got a bit of a lift and what have you. But it just needed that that Foster chance where he's curled one wide and a couple of little snippets. Where Koleosho came central, couple of give and goes. That they had little sniffs of chances that didn't quite materialise into shots on goal, like you say, Simon.
Yeah. Justin, were you as surprised as everybody else with that lineup? I mean, I think I described it to a mate I was still in the pub with as pretty wild, because I just couldn't see what the formation was going to be. I couldn't really understand the thinking. I mean, there was only Roberts there from pre-Company days in that starting lineup, if I'm not mistaken. Were you surprised not to perhaps see one or two of the old guard? I mean, no Charlie Taylor or Jay Rodriguez in the matchday squad. You can only suspect that might be down to niggles or whatever, but no Goodmanson, no Cork, no Brownhill, all of which have featured quite heavily in pre-season.
The big surprise for me was that Zaruri wasn't playing from the off, and that Brownhill wasn't playing. I think we kind of expected a strange sort of situation going on at the back on account of the fact that we don't have that left back that Company feels he can trust. So there was always going to be like a makeshift solution to that, which seemed to me, I don't know. You said you couldn't quite puzzle out what the formation was. It seemed like sometimes we play with 3 centre backs and like two wide players, but yeah, it was a strange one, and it's always weird to me. I think that when you see the team playing in pre-season and they line up a certain way, it changed from game to game, so it was quite difficult to predict what was going to happen. But I think Brownhill was one of our best players last season. Zaruri, I think, is like the real deal, and is going to do well in the Premier League. So not not to start with those two, and as we've said, throw Bergin after 2 days at the club does seem like a bit of a pet move, doesn't it? It's one of those, like, I'm just going to pick a ridiculous lineup that's going to try, throw the opposition off balance. It felt like a bit of one of those sort of moves to me.
Yeah, and Simon, we'll talk about, move on to some negatives. Playing Vitinho in that role for me didn't really work. I mean, he has a bit of a hand in the opening 2 goals by his positional sense perhaps not being as good as it should. What were the other negatives, aside from Zarori's sending off, which is going to cost him, 3 games of his Premier League season, debut season, I should say? What were the other kind of negatives for you in that performance on Friday?
I think when Mick Phelan was talking to us last week, he said the big issue was, where's the 15 goals going to come from up front? Where's the other goals going to come from? I didn't see anything at all from Burnley's attack that suggested we have that player. That's not to say that Amdouni didn't have moments where he looked really promising, breaking through the lines, making things happen. Looked like a player who could be dangerous at this level. Very promising performance from him, as others have said. Lyle Foster, I'm still not sure about Lyle Foster, to be honest. I mean, a lot of people said, it was a better game from him, and we've all said that he looked better in pre-season than he had done in his glimpses last season, and I agree with all of that. But still, what did he actually produce? He runs in a straight line quite fast, and maybe forces a corner or something. I mean, he's not looking like a number 9 who's going to score 15 goals in the Premier League, not on the basis of what we've seen so far. And nothing against City suggested that he is. It was a useful performance from him. I'm not saying it was a bad performance, but I think that lack of a goal threat, with the massive caveat that we've got to all of this, which is you're playing against a very, very good defence as well. Manchester City have got qualities all the way through the side. And then, you have to look at the defending on those goals. I mean, they were super goals from Haaland, great finishes, but that doesn't mean you don't look at the way that they left the space for him. And I've looked quite a bit at that, and that did happen. O'Shea on the first, and then Bayer on the second, and Vitinho's role in that you could discuss as well. And Kompany himself, he's very careful with his messaging, isn't he? But he did say in there, if we're going to concede goals, let's concede good ones, So he was kind of, I think he didn't want to point the finger at his defenders after that game, but Gary Neville did. He saw that as well, that that we'd backed off a little bit. So that's going to happen. That's not a problem. I think the defenders are good players on the whole. But for me, that was those two ends, and it's what George Boyd said, isn't it? When we asked him what's the difference in the Premier League between the Premier League and the Championship, the biggest difference, he said the quality at both ends in the box, and we didn't have it in our attacking end, and they had it at theirs, and we perhaps didn't have that defensive quality there when it mattered.
Yeah. Would it? I mean, running fast in a straight line and a useful performance, you'd have been quite happy to have been described like that, wouldn't you, in your footballing days? I know you're not playing at the top level, but is there something? Are you as worried as Simon is about where the goals are going to come from?
It's still one of my strong points, Andrew, if you don't mind. Yes, it always was, and it's going. I don't see where 10 goals are coming from. Never mind 15. And counter that with the fact that it only took us 3 minutes to work out just quite off the Premier League pace we were, while everybody stared at just letting Haaland do his thing. And the point is, every single side, not only in the Premiership, but in a few leagues below, are going to score that kind of goal against us if we stand off them and give them that kind of space. So, defensive work, I'm arguably a little bit more worried about, but hopefully I'd like, if we're going to blow 30 million on someone, let it be a striker. Let's make that final intent and that final intention to get somebody to score those goals, even though Foster impressed upon me more than he arguably has done in any game in a Claret shirt so far, but I still don't know whether he's that double figures guy moving forwards.
Yeah. And Chris, I mean, we saw from the documentary how much emphasis Vincent puts on going through those tapes and looking, he'll have an idea of what he needs, Warney, now over the next 2 weeks, the final 2 weeks of the transfer window. Company will know from that performance and from pre-season what he needs, Warney.
A winger. They only have 5 on the bench on Friday night. It's clearly you need more wingers. Looking at, it's obviously a different level. I don't know how many goal scorers they finished up with last season. So, they've shown that they can all chip in to some extent. I think Burnley's Wood and Barnes came close on occasion, didn't they, in terms of hitting that 15-goal mark? But it's going to require a team effort, I think, unless they can go out and sign that. But Championship sides are finding that they can't find that sort of 10, 15, goal a season striker. Can we find it? Is it Teller? He's never played at this level for any extended period of time. He's had a fabulous campaign with Burnley last year. He started well with what effectively was his goal on opening night. It took a marginal nick off Adam Armstrong for Southampton. But it's. Do you see Obafemi getting fit and doing that? Not particularly on what we've seen so far. It's you're asking a lot for J-Rod to roll back the years and sort of hit double figures again. It's it's a real tall ask. As much as I love Jay to pieces and the contribution he's made down the years, but it's. I said the Luton game, it might be a blessing because that might have been a real sticky one to go there on Saturday. To everyone, Burnley are used to going to that sort of stadium from the Championship, and it's that's not necessarily an issue going to Kenilworth Road. But for their first home game, bang up for it. It's better to have a fortnight. Better to have a fortnight on the training ground, and let's another fortnight with the executives trying to bring bodies through the door.
I will say on Teller, if there was a YouTube video of Teller's goals last season, but he was wearing the shirt of a Belgian side or a French second division team, and we saw those 17 goals, we'd all be saying, "Oh, snap him up. We'll have him. He looks interesting." But now, for some reason, I keep hearing people saying, "Well, he's not proven the Premier League level." Well, he isn't. But none of these players we've signed are. None of them.
No.
So,
That's
what's
true.
the difference? Championship is about as close to the Premier League as you're going to get outside of the Premier League and the top 3 or 4 leagues in Europe.
Yeah. And just touching on that point that, Chris made, Chris Wood got close to that 15-goal mark. Barnes, he got close. Strikers for Burnley in the Premier League scoring 15, 20 goals, they're as rare as rocking horse shit, aren't they? I mean, where are you going to find a player who's going to be able to fit that traditional number 9 that you get at perhaps some of the big clubs? I mean, Spurs have lost Kane this week to Bayern Munich. There's not many clubs with that big kind of 20 goal a season guy, is there? And
no,
do you see us getting one? Do you see us being able to find one?
A lot of players, a lot of teams don't play that way anymore, do they? They don't play with that target man up front. I don't know. If I knew where he was, I'd be on the phone to Vincent Kompany right now. We do need to replace Vegos. We do need that. There's a hole in the squad there, isn't there, for another striker, someone who can. We talked a little bit on the WhatsApp group about how we perhaps don't have that plan B now, where we can switch things up and change the way we play in the way we did last year, where we had Barnes who could play different ways in different games, and we did scrap out some results that way. So we do need somebody who can offer that something a bit different. But to be honest with you, I'm not taking many negatives from that performance against City. It's one game. I'm worried about where the goals are going to come from, like everybody else. But I think the intensity of the pressing that we showed against City, I think if we do that against other teams, there are teams in this division that won't be able to cope with that. And I think a lot will depend on how quickly Foster gets off the mark. If he can get a goal early on, we might be seeing a different story as the season begins to play out. But we can't judge anything, can we, until we've played a few more sides of varying quality. It's one game. It's was a strange game. All that stuff pre-game with JJ Watt and Alan Pace, and I forget the YouTubers' names, but they were sort of all lining up, weren't they? Dude perfect. Yeah. Perfect. I'm not sure. I always put that in the column of things that aren't aimed at me, but it all did seem a bit weird. and you know, Haaland burst the bubble fairly quickly, didn't he? But I think we got away with I think we come out of that game thinking, you know, we don't really know where we stand yet because we've not played enough sides, but we didn't get battered. All those players who had never played in the Premier League have now got their Premier League debut out of the way. It's all learning and it's all progress from now.
Definitely. And you mentioned replacing Vegos. I have actually got a clause made and I was going to stick on Facebook Marketplace that I think might get us 2 or 3 extra goals. I'm quite happy, you know, if Vincent's struggling, there's a clause made, and I might even throw in an old pair of boxer shorts as well to make it even more attractive.
It's Manchester United you've got to worry about. How do they replace his goals?
Exactly. I mean, that contribution, I mean, they're just, you know, they're going to be in a relegation dogfight, aren't they? But let's have a look at the Premier League then. Let's have a look at the Premier League. So we'll rattle through some results. So Arsenal in the slightly delayed early kickoff beat Nottingham Forest 2-1. Bournemouth won, West Ham won. Luton Town on their Premier League debut suffered a 4-1 defeat at Brighton. Everton, you know, I was talking about Everton and them needing a striker. They had a lot of good play. Didn't really make it count. Neil Maupay is not the answer to their striker problems. If Dominic Calvert-Lewin's not fit, they lost 1-0 at home to Fulham. Sheffield United lost 1-0 at home to Palace. Probably the most surprising one, perhaps, Villa getting beat 5-1 at Newcastle. Newcastle looked superb. And then yesterday, Brentford 2, Spurs 2, first game without Harry Kane. And then Chelsea and Liverpool playing out a rather entertaining 1-0 draw. I know we can't take much from the opening fixtures, Simon, but was there any kind of performances that stood out there for you? Any surprises in those performances? We didn't really get any giant killings in a traditional sense, did we?
No, but Newcastle really stood out. I mean, they looked really, really good, especially on the counter-attack, you know, and Anthony Gordon looked really impressive. Like a proper left winger you could imagine being called up into the England team, which I never quite saw at Everton when people were talking about him as a future England international. And you watch him yesterday and you think, yeah, I can see that. And then Harvey Barnes comes on that flank as well and scores a goal and looks very lively as well. The midfield, Tonali on his debut, you know, making an instant impact, scoring a goal and looking comfortable, nearly got another one. I thought Newcastle looked great. You know, they've got obviously a big challenge with European football as well as the domestic one, which is going to stretch sort of Eddie's squad as far as it'll go. But their actual starting 11 yesterday, the way they played, they look like they will be up there in the top 4 again this year.
Yeah, Woody, we were just talking about being worried about goals, as Simon pointed out. Harvey Barnes got a goal. Their new signing, Callum Wilson, got a goal. 2 for Isak. 1 for Tonali. You know, they had 4 goal scorers on opening day. I mean, that's the level we're up against, isn't it? And again, you know, beating Newcastle or getting results against Newcastle is not going to be what keeps us up. But I guess that proves what Mike Phelan was saying, what Georgie Boyd was saying, that the level is just a step above, isn't it?
It's a completely different beast. Like Sam was saying, I never quite got the Anthony Gordon hype until I saw him yesterday. You know, and they were exceptional, and they could be this season's Arsenal, arguably, way. Even though even Arsenal could be this season's Arsenal, but yeah, you need that ability to be able to shift it around a little bit and show penetration and make it count when it has to count. And they were something else for Newcastle, and that seems to prove to me what a step up it really genuinely is going to be.
Yeah. And Chris, I mean, you dealt with Eddie, you know, a lot while he was at Burnley. Are you as surprised as me that he stayed at Newcastle as long? I think I got the impression that he was almost the night watchman, and the Saudis, when they came in, wanted somebody to steady the ship, keep them up, and then they would just pot him in favour of a more glamorous, more bigger name coach. But are you surprised, knowing Eddie probably better than any of us, at what he's been able to do and the way he's knitted together what is a beautiful looking side? They've lost a couple of players, but it looks a stunning side, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely, not in the slightest. Not in the slightest. I think it's a real shame that things didn't quite knit together at Burnley. There were moments, where we started to see this sort of patient passing game coming together. And I remember one night against it might have been Sheffield Wednesday at home, and they worked the ball down the left hand side, and they couldn't advance. Came out, ended up going all the way back, and there's moans and groans from the crowd. They worked it down the right, cross comes in, bang, Charlie Austin. And Eddie, I remember speaking to Eddie about that, and he was just sort of, we've got to have this patience. And he's, really, not just from, dealing with it, but he'd invite us to, a couple of training camps in Bath and things like that, and actually watching him on the training ground and the methods and just how he I think people see this little, man child, because he's got these, he does have that sort of babyish look, and they think, well, he's not going to be able to, command respect. And you look at that Newcastle documentary, and
it's very weird when he's swearing, isn't it?
Eddie's swearing, yeah. But he's got that tough edge to him as well. And despite all that, I mean, I see Klopp was even having a bit of a dig about Jason Tindall as well. I think you're only allowed one guy in the technical area, one coach. Yeah, so he was sort of saying, I think Newcastle will struggle, won't he? But Jason Tindall's an ideal foil for him. But he wants to play the right way. He's learned from mistakes he's made earlier in his coaching career. I mean, if you look back defensively at Burnley, we're shipping goals left, right, and centre. But then he goes to Bournemouth and wins the Championship title with a magnificent defensive record. I think he conceded less than a goal a game, winning the Championship title. But no, he's the way. Well, you look at clubs who've come into money and the way they've gone about it. I hate to bring up our rivals down the road, but Kenny Dalglish went about bringing in the players for where they were at that moment in time, and he got them out of that league, and then he got them he added and added and added. He got Newcastle out of that situation at the bottom of the table with the right players. He's added again in the summer and made them better. And I'm sort of looking at the predictions this season, you're thinking, well, Newcastle finished top 4 last season, and they are significantly better again. Surely they're going to be top 4, because I don't see Liverpool having made significantly better. Liverpool could just click and just go off on a run. Chelsea could do the same. But Newcastle have got they're organised. I think they'll finish top 4 again. I think it'll take a hell of a side to shift them out of that.
Yeah, definitely. And just touching on, I think Chris mentioned Chelsea very briefly then at the end, but Ian Maatsen came on for I think his first taste of Premier League football for Chelsea. Bit of a dog chasing a Chris Packett in the win performance, being asked to play a bit more of a forward role. There's a lot of kind of he snatched at a shot or slid into a shot. Without kind of getting your crystal ball out, where do you think him playing today kind of leaves us in our chase for Maatsen? Because it was a cameo, it was only a short, but he did get on ahead of Cucurella, didn't he?
He did, didn't he? But it looks to me like Pochettino doesn't really feel he's going to play in that position. I mean, Chilwell obviously has got that role tied down, and you would guess that that Maatsen's not going to get many games in that position. And he only played 10 minutes or so, but I think the fact that he's in the sort of top 15 players at Chelsea on day one would lend you to believe that he's probably not going anywhere, is he? He's probably part of that group, and he's probably going to remain part of that group. If he hadn't played today and just been sat on the bench, I would have been a bit more optimistic. But the fact he gets on, I think, is probably a negative for us. But at the end of the day, if we don't get him, we've got to get somebody else, haven't we? So it may be an opportunity for us to look elsewhere, get somebody who's got as much potential as he has, and perhaps not spend as much money. It does make me feel like that sort of 20 million that we could have spent on him, what was it, a month ago, probably would be more now if we want to go back in for him. So maybe we've missed a trick there, but there are plenty more fish in the sea, aren't there? And if we have to look elsewhere, I'm sure that there's a long list in Vincent Kompany's filing cabinet that they're working their way through at the moment. That's my hope.
There's two at Chelsea. There's two at Chelsea. Yeah. There's young Lewis Hall that people rave about as well. And what about a cheeky little loan bid for Cucurella?
Why not? Why not? It doesn't look like he's going to get many games.
Yeah. Still got his 2 Premier League loans left. I'm sure we'll chat to Fab and to Sasha before as next podcast on Friday, of course, the usual Friday podcast. But Simon, just to finish, we've done Maatsen, we've done Eddie Howe. Let's do Sean Dyche. I don't know how much you saw the Everton game on Saturday, but I watched it. I thought they looked superb. There was some really. Alex Iwobi had a cracking game. There was some really good standout performances. Got them well organised. Got them zipping that ball about. That age-old Everton problem, there's no Calvert-Lewin, you have no focal point strike, a bit like us. How do you see Sean Dyche and Everton faring this season based on an opening day fixture?
Yeah, I didn't see anything beyond the highlights, but I think that they're going to struggle again. I think, not necessarily being right in the dogfight, but I think they'll be in that bottom third. If you split the Premier League into thirds, I think they'd be in that bottom part of it, because you just need that goal scorer. We just talked about it being a concern for us. It's definitely a concern to Everton. I mean, I don't know what's going on with Calvert-Lewin. It's such a shame. He was in absolutely fantastic form when Ancelotti was there. I mean, Ancelotti had worked with him on the training ground, and we did. It was COVID. It's going back to COVID times, and he did a Zoom interview with a few of us, and was talking about how Ancelotti had said to him, go on YouTube and look up Filippo Inzaghi, and how he'd just been watching Inzaghi's goals and all the positions he got into. And you could see it happening on the field. I thought he was really getting close to being a player who, obviously Kane's England's main man in that position, but that the main alternative would be Calvert-Lewin. And he's just been injury after injury, hasn't it? So, he doesn't seem to have the resources there to go and get somebody. And he's there doesn't seem to be a young player coming through who he can throw in there. So it's a case of him sort of managing that situation and trying to eke out goals from his wide players or something. So I think they are going to struggle to get out of the bottom third. Sorry.
Yeah, definitely. Let's leave it there, chaps. Thank you so much as ever for contributions. Don't forget, you can catch our usual podcast on Friday on all your usual platforms. Don't forget, you can log on to fromthebln.com for all of the links to the various podcast platforms that we're on. And don't forget, you can check us out on social media at BL Podcast on Twitter and Facebook. Don't forget, leave us a review, a like, share, tell your friends, get in touch, drop us some feedback, whatever you want, via the message boards as well. But until next time, enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you soon.